Hi, and welcome back to Undisclosed Toward Justice. This is our ongoing weekly series where Colin and I get to talk about kind of whatever we want when we are off season. Colin, hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Hanging in there, getting ready for the holidays.
Yeah.
This week, I am really excited to have, although I obviously wish in better circumstances, but to have on a man who reached out to me, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, about his father's case, which from the jump seemed like it had very strong innocence factors. And at the time, I believe this was like when Undisclosed was on hiatus, and my own father, I was very ill, and so I remained in touch in the case, but we didn't really kind of do any work on the case. But I really wanted to have him on to talk about his father's case. So I want to welcome Francisco Serrano to our show today. Hi, Francisco.
Rob, yeah, Colin, it's nice to be here.
So I often talk about, and I was just talking to a group of legal professionals a couple of days ago. I gave a talk, and I bring this issue up a lot where it's remarkable to me. We've done, over 24 cases on Undisclosed in the last decade. And this might be the only case, I'm not kidding, Francisco, in which the person on the outside who does not give up on the defendant is a male. It's always a sister, a mother, a significant other. I think this is the only case I've ever come across where it is a son. It is a male figure who has not given up on their case. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, maybe a couple of facts about the case? And then I'll go through some more of the facts to set it up for our audience if they haven't heard about it.
Sure. So I'm the firstborn of three from my parents. My parents got here in 1964 as immigrants from Ecuador. They started out in, I'll just call them menial jobs. You know, my father was a highly respected agricultural engineer in his country. My mother was the executive secretary to the president of the Central Bank of Ecuador. But they decided they wanted to come to the United States for the opportunity. My father started out as a draftsman, my mother as a seamstress, and they built the American dream. Within 7 years, they were able to buy their first house. They raised us, well, and provided. Then my father got into his own company, went into what was very successful as a person that designed distribution centers for retail department stores. He developed himself as a legend, really. And then when he started his own company, he grew that company and got to a point where he did a merger with another company that was a manufacturer of the types of conveying systems. And then their company grew. And then the money was so much that they started fighting about money. Next thing you know, $1 million disappears. My father and I quit the company. And 6 months later, 4 people are dead in the offices of our old company.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to from here, I think I'll just kind of transition to and set up the facts of the case, and then we can go back. Is that okay?
Sure.
Anything you want to add right now? Okay. Because we're going to get into basically a long struggle since then to exonerate and how they extradited him, kidnapped him, all that stuff too in the discussion points.
Okay.
So Colin, I wanted to ask you, do you know about the facts of this case? Are you acquainted with it at all?
I looked them up a few years ago. I think maybe when we had received the inquiry about the case, but again, we were sort of the off season. So I know a little bit about the case, but now I'm sort of getting up to speed a little bit.
Well, for undisclosed listeners, you might remember our case in which, oh God, Colin, how do you say his name?
Temujin Kensu.
Temujin Kensu, thank you. For our undisclosed listeners, you might remember the case of Temujin Kensu, and I bring that up because that was when a lot of our listeners heard that case, they thought, this is an insane narrative, where the prosecution is arguing that this defendant was in a whole different part. I think was he in a different part of the state or an actual other state? But anyhow, that he flew back to kill a defendant, to kill the victim, and then flew back, and all this went undetected. Well, hold your horses, because we have a similar situation here, and even I think a crazier, truth is stranger than fiction. You couldn't make this up type of case. I was shocked by the facts of it. So I want to tell our listeners some of the basic facts of the case, and then we'll get into just all the stuff that is just unbelievable about this and how this unfolded. Okay. So, as Francisco told us, his father, Nelson, became a very, very successful businessman, right? And Francisco, feel free to jump in anytime, as I'm laying out the facts.
Thanks.
But at some point there began to be some disputes between Nelson and his business partners, right?
There was a lot of money. They'd never seen that kind of money. And next thing you know, there's a little bit of a tug and war. And then they took $1 million out of that corporate bank account without wanting to give an explanation to the corporate attorney, to the corporate accountant, or to us. And we didn't realize why they stole that money until later.
Okay. So this is ongoing. And then did they get involved in some litigation as well?
My father, as shareholder and CEO of both companies, sued them, for taking the $1 million.
Okay.
And then I also sued them for their breach of our employment agreement.
Okay. So this is ongoing. And as this is ongoing and has not been resolved, right, what happens is on Wednesday, December 3rd, 1997, and this takes place in Bartow, Florida, at the Erie manufacturing facility, there is a quadruple murder. And the victims are 69-year-old George Gonzalez, who is one of Nelson's partners in the business, 35-year-old Frank Dasso, 27-year-old Diane Dasso Petiso, and I believe Frank and Diane were brother and sister. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep. And 26-year-old George Petiso, who is married to Diane. So
Right.
it's Diane, her brother, and her husband, and then George Gonzalez. And my understanding is that Frank and Diane, who are the siblings, are the children of one of the other business partners, right?
Correct. And Diane was an assistant DA
Right.
at the time.
Yeah. And so obviously a horrific killing. They've all been killed by guns. And it was at the time the biggest mass killing in Bartow ever. And, this is not exactly a major jurisdiction, and their law enforcement agency really didn't have the chops to be handling a case like this. And apparently for the first 72 hours, they're like, no, we got this. We'll do this. And then after 72 hours, they realized, okay, we actually need some help. And how do you think that affected, by the way, the investigation? Because 72 hours is quite a while in the initial stages of an investigation.
Yeah, any criminal attorney will tell you that most of the times you get your clues within the first 72 hours. If you don't, it's over, basically. And when you have people, police officers and investigators of a city of Bartow, which is a tiny city, who don't have the wherewithal or knowledge or experience getting in there, denying the FBI to come in, denying for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to help them, they really corrupted a lot of the evidences that were there from what we assume. And there was a lot of bullet casings. There was a lot of blood. There was a lot of everything. So they really screwed things up. And then 3 days later, they were like, okay, please, we need your help. And it really hurt the case.
Yeah. I think what I understand is the investigators from the beginning felt that it was George Gonzalez, the business partner, who was the actual target, and the others might have been collateral damage because they happened to be there. Is that your sense as well?
It was. That's true. Very true.
So how did Nelson get involved? And Nelson is obviously no longer there. He's not working there anymore. He doesn't. And in fact, at that time, hadn't your father moved back to Ecuador?
At the time of the murders, this was only 6 months after my father and I had departed Erie and Garment.
Okay.
My father was actually in Atlanta at the time of the murders. So, but they were still in Florida. He did not retire until the year 2000.
Oh, okay. That's later. And we'll get into that part of the story as well. So Nelson Serrano was in Atlanta, and we know he's in Atlanta because there is ample evidence that he's in Atlanta, because in the hotel he's staying at, there's footage of him in the hotel in the morning, like around what, 10:30 or so?
It was like 12:47.
Oh, right. You're right.
And then again at 10:17 p.m.
At night. So in the afternoon, early afternoon, and then later in the evening, he's seen on video camera footage, that he is in this hotel. So he's really far away. He's like 500 miles away from the crime scene, right?
Correct.
Because Bardo is sort of by the Tampa, St. Petersburg area, right?
It's actually central. So if you go straight east from Tampa and then straight south from Orlando, you'll find Bartow.
Yeah, so I'm looking at like 460 miles on Google Maps is the distance between that and Atlanta.
Yeah. So, Francisco, you're also involved in kind of the litigation, everything that's going on. So I'm assuming the police also approached you and thought maybe you were involved because early on, the remaining whatever family members, they were like, well, there is this litigation going on. Maybe the Serranos had something to do with it, right?
Well, it's worse than that. So I mean, when they came knocking at my door at 10 or something that night, uh, there was people pointing guns at me. There were cops
Oh
pointing
wow.
guns at me.
Hmm.
And when they were asking me to come in, um, when Felice and Nicoletta Dasso, the other shareholder, um, had discovered the bodies and they dialed 911, Felice screamed into the phone, Nelson did this. Nelson did this.
Oh, from the jump.
Wow.
Hmm. Right.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, Nelson was then questioned as well, I believe, the day after the murders. And
Right.
had he returned from Atlanta? Where was he the next day? And why was he in Atlanta, by the way?
So we had received a couple of contracts. He went to Washington, D.C. He was there, and then he flew into Atlanta. He had 2 days worth of meetings, and then he cut his sales trip down by 1 day to come home in order to go to the police.
Okay, okay. But on the day of the murders, what Nelson said to the police was that he wasn't taking meetings, that he had a migraine and he stayed in all day, right?
Correct. He had to postpone his meetings, which he suffered from migraines, intense migraines since he was 18.
Okay. Well, initially, because of this alibi, the police did, I guess, kind of eliminate him as a suspect, I believe.
Oh,
And he wasn't arrested until 3 years later, right?
the case went cold.
Okay.
Um, in fact, they did they did stage an arrest of my father out of the courthouse while the cameras of America Most Wanted were there. This was all just a theatrical thing because they
Mm.
tried to do it 2 weeks early,
Mm.
and then America's Most Wanted at the last minute canceled.
Wow.
So then they postponed it for 2 weeks, brought him back in on the premise of testifying in front of a grand jury, and that's when they took the opportunity to get him in front of the cameras, put him on handcuffs, and keep him overnight. Of course, they released him the next day, um, and this was all again theatrics because of what they were trying to accomplish for the next election.
Well, can you tell us, the case went cold. How did it heat back up again? What led them to arresting Nelson?
So this is happening in 1997,
Mhm.
right? They investigated my father. They bugged his phones. They had all our emails, our phones all bugged. All this goes through. I'm in Tampa. He's in Atlanta. Um, they investigated an employee who a week or two before the murders had shown up to work at 7 a.m. He showed his co-employees a gun and he said he's come here to kill George. And they told him, go home, put that gun away and call in sick. Just calm down. And he did that. And 2 weeks later, the murders occurred. So supposedly they investigated him as well.
Mm.
And then nothing came out of this, even though they had the evidence, all the evidence in the testimony of the real killers. They let the case go cold, completely cold. But then Jerry Hill, who's the assistant district attorney, was up for his fourth reelection. The first three he went unopposed, but the Republican Party would not back him because he failed to resolve the worst case in Central Florida. When I say Central Florida, we're including Orlando.
Mm.
Bartow might be tiny, but Orlando's not. This was the worst mass murder crime like this in the history of Central Florida. Because he didn't do it, they said, we're not going to back you. And because we don't want the Democrats to bring up somebody to say this guy doesn't do his job. There is when, in the year 2000, that these fingerprints miraculously are quote unquote found, and they can use those to indict my father in 2001.
Okay. We'll get into the specifics of that fingerprint evidence, but Nelson was eventually convicted of a crime in 2006. A jury voted 9-3, not just to convict him, but also to sentence him to death. And he was on death row since 2006. And I believe when you came to me, you said to me that he was the oldest person on death row at that time.
The oldest.
Yeah. I have long felt that I need an assistant just to manage my finances because it takes time. It takes time to figure out how many subscriptions you have and cancel the ones that are duplicates. It takes time to track expenses. It takes time to look at your budget and then stick to it. Luckily, Rocket Money does all the heavy lifting for you. No need for a personal assistant anymore. And Rocket Money automatically finds you ways to save and simplify the process. It's less stress, it's more free time, and it's a clearer path toward financial freedom all in one app. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, and it helps to lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It will show you all your expenses in one place. And listen, I completely understand that one of the hardest parts about adulting is figuring this stuff out and even confronting it. But you don't have to. When you sign up for Rocket Money, it takes care of all of it for you, and it's right there in your phone. Not only that, Rocket Money will help you cancel the things you don't want anymore. Their easy-to-read dashboard lays out their whole financial picture, including the due dates for bills and your paydays, and it's easy to digest, and it doesn't feel like it's something you have to confront anymore. And believe it or not, Rocket Money will even negotiate lower bills for you. That's because the app automatically scans your bills to find opportunities to save and then gets to work to get you better deals. They'll even talk to customer service, so you don't have to, because who wants to? I couldn't believe when I signed up for Rocket Money that I had numerous subscriptions to the same service linked to different email accounts and didn't realize that for years I had been double and triple paying. But Rocket Money has saved me hundreds of dollars over the years, and they have saved all their users over $2.5 billion, including over $880 million in canceled subscriptions alone. Their 10 million members save up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. So if you're like me and like most people, you could stand to save a couple extra bucks a month. And you can easily now cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/justice today. That's rocketmoney.com/justice. rocketmoney.com/justice. Now, then in 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court said that the death penalty statute in Florida was unconstitutional because you needed a unanimous jury to impose a death sentence. Because again, it was a 9-3 recommendation for the death sentence. And so Nelson was granted a new sentence, that he be resentenced to something less than death.
Right.
But then in 2020, that precedent was overturned. Colin, are you familiar with how that went down? What does that mean? I mean, how can a U.S. Supreme Court ruling be overturned by lower courts? I'm confused about this.
Yes, this is interesting. We covered it a bit in our Rocky Myers case because Rocky was in Alabama and he was convicted of murder and he was given a death sentence despite the majority of the jury wanting a life sentence. And this is interesting, and I think it really fits well here for Nelson's case. The Equal Justice Initiative has found, especially in cases where otherwise you would think the jury would be unanimous in imposing a death sentence, when they're not unanimous, that expresses a concept we call residual doubt, which is somewhere between not guilty and guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And a lot of exonerations of death row inmates are with non-unanimous verdicts. And you look at this case, as we just laid out, it's a quadruple homicide. It's the most gruesome crime in Central Florida history, and yet there were still 3 jurors who were not willing to vote for a death sentence, which shows there were some doubts about the case. And then, there's this whole messiness with the Supreme Court saying you need a unanimous verdict. And this sort of relates to whether the death sentence by the jury is a recommendation as opposed to a vote. And that ultimately allows some wiggle room for the lower courts to say we can kind of change the way we do non-unanimous jury verdicts, and that is what Florida ultimately does.
Oh, so what they did was, it was a technicality. They said, okay, we're gonna frame this as a recommendation,
right?
Not an order, basically. And so that allows it. Well, and then in 2023, which is not too long ago, the Florida legislature and Governor DeSantis also changed the threshold to recommending death to 8 to 4, which is even like, a larger margin than Nelson had faced. So I want to go back to the time frame, Francisco, of before Nelson was apprehended and detained, and charged with this crime, and that, like, those 3 years. Can you tell us what was going on in those 3 years, and then how the U.S. government got him?
But to answer the first question, he was in county jail, which was, for all intended purposes, to stretches of your imagination, a hellhole. His treatment in there was the most barbaric thing I ever heard of. To keep a man of his age, who was well into his 60s, completely naked for 247 days in a cell with nothing in it, no water, no soap, the walls covered in human excrement, a towel on the floor for him to sleep on, fans blowing on him, continuously cold air, stadium lights on 24 hours a day, being woken up every 15 to 30 minutes. For 247 days, he endured all of this. This is how he went through 3 years of his life under the most unbelievable torture, something that you would never think as Americans would even occur in our country. Now, how he got there was a combination of Ecuadorian officials who were working for the U.S. Embassy at the time. Victor, I should say his last name was Pastor Peñarera. So he was an ex-colonel of the National Police of Ecuador. He was working in the U.S. Embassy when Tommy Ray, who was an FDLE detective, John Aguero, who is a Florida district attorney, Paul Wallace, who's another Florida district attorney, and Fred Warden of the FBI traveled down to Ecuador to try to negotiate a way to have him extradited, because there was an extradition.
So Nelson moved to Ecuador at this point?
Yeah, so the case had been cold, and my father told me when we decided to start our own company in 1997 that he's going to give me 3 years. He goes, I've always planned to retire summer of 2000, and that's when I'm going to retire. So we'll build this company up to whatever it can be, but then I'm out of here, and then you can do what you want. So that summer, that's exactly what he did. By doing so, and then Jerry Hill realizing he's not going to be reelected because of this, is when they come up with the fingerprints, they indict him, and then they realize, well, wait a minute, he's in Ecuador. The extradition treaty, which has been in effect since 1898, thereabouts, wasn't going to allow them to deport an Ecuadorian citizen, because my father had dual nationality. Mm. So the only way you can do that, according to the extradition treaty, is if you prove in court in Ecuador that you have substantial evidence to take him to the United States and try him there. So the Ecuador would have to approve his release, but through a trial, not a trial like we would think, but
maybe a grand jury type proceeding.
There's a panel of judges, and then they review the evidence, and then if they're satisfied, then they'll allow the extradition, because it's against the Constitution to deport an Ecuadorian, only in this case, right? When they realized that wasn't going to work, because they didn't have the evidence to do so, when Paul Wallace went back with Tommy Ray in August, and then working with Jorge Pastor in the U.S. Embassy, and through his DEA contacts, Ecuadorian DEA contacts, they basically grabbed my father coming out of a restaurant at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, walking out with my mother and 4 of their friends in an unmarked van. These guys were completely suited up with machine guns. They grabbed them by gunpoint, grabbed them and threw them in. And of course, everybody's going, wait a minute, where's the arrest warrant? What are you doing? Who are you? And at gunpoint, they were pushed back. My mother ends up getting in a cab with one of the friends and followed that van until they got to the immigration department, at which point they were halted at the door. These people, grabbing my father, went out the back door into another car, took him to the airport, and then stuffed him into a dog cage after they beat him and drugged him. At one point, my father was asked to get out, and he did. And while the guards that were guarding him, watching a soccer game, he was just about to pick up the phone to make an emergency call. when the phone rang, they saw him. Then they beat him again, put him back in the dog cage. 7 o'clock Sunday morning, they boarded him onto an American Airlines flight, bloody, bruised, drugged. The flight attendant denied his entry on board the plane. Tommy Ray got the captain up. The captain American Airlines captain let him on the flight, and they took him to Miami. So without going through immigration, without any papers, exiting the country, anything.
And I mean, this is in complete violation of Ecuador's sovereignty as well, and in a circumvention of the due process, right, that they have in place to make sure this doesn't happen to their citizens. So how did you're alerted? Your mother knows. How do you tell? Who do you tell? Where do you go in terms of the Ecuadorian government to like remedy this? And what does the government do?
Well, it was extremely difficult those days, as you can probably imagine, as a rug got pulled out from underneath your feet and all this stuff happened. We didn't find out until later on Sunday that he actually had been taken out of the country.
Oh, okay.
And then, so when we raised Cain with the Ecuadorian government, there was all this denial going on because they had also bribed a sheriff in the city of Quito, provincial sheriff. He drafted some paperwork that said, no, we deported him. He was a U.S. citizen. He was not Ecuadorian. He had stayed past his tourist visa. Ecuadorian government was fighting all this because of their relationships with the U.S., as well as a lot of individuals in government not wanting their visa pulled if they were to say something against the U.S. So we had to go up front with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and we filed a case immediately against the country of Ecuador for their role in this abduction and the violation of his rights, of which that took until 2009. So this is how long this process took before the Inter-American Commission ruled that Ecuador was in violation. And then it took until the end of that year for Ecuador themselves to admit to that ruling and to commit to the recommendations of that commission.
And in the United States, like how far up the chain did this kind of command or this permission for this? I mean, it's like an operation, basically. Like they kidnapped him from a foreign country. Like, were you able to determine like where the buck stopped? Like who ordered this? Who allowed this?
Oh, I have all the emails. I mean, thank God for WikiLeaks. We have all the emails between the U.S. State Department, right? The FDLE in Florida, the District Attorney's Office in Florida, the Justice Department, U.S. Justice Department. There were conversations going on back and forth. The U.S. Embassy, all turning around saying, what are we doing here? Is this okay? What's going on? And you can see the panic happening, and then you can see the lying going on by the state of Florida, the lying coming out of certain people out of the embassy saying, no, we got this. Don't worry about it. We're good. And the other one's going, well, we better be good. And you can see that in all the emails. So that's how far up all this was going on. But of course, it happened so quickly. So imagine August 12th, right around there, the state of Florida says, okay, we want to extradite Nelson Serrano. And the U.S. State Department delivers to the Ecuadorian consulate, in Washington, D.C., their request for extradition based on the treaty. And they turn around and go, well, you can't enforce the death penalty in big capped letters. And second, we have to have a trial over it. And they were like, well, the hell with that.
Yeah.
And that's when they decided we're just going to go down there and figure out who to bribe and how we can just get him. And once he's here, ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah. I know you have heard of HelloFresh. I mean, who hasn't? They are the #1 meal kit in America, making home cooking easier with chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients delivered straight to your door. But this fall, they're serving up even more to love. This is not the HelloFresh you remember. It's bigger. HelloFresh has doubled its menu. Now you can choose from 100 options every week, including new seasonal dishes and recipes from around the world. And you can dig into bigger portions that help keep everybody satisfied. Their menu is even healthier. You can choose from 15 plus high-protein recipes each week with options like grass-fed ribeyes or lamb chops. HelloFresh now helps you eat greener with new veggie pack recipes that have 2 or more veggies per dish. And HelloFresh is tastier. You get steak and seafood recipes delivered every week for no extra cost, now with 3 times the seafood options. And you can discover new seasonal produce each week, from leeks to broccolini to Italian eggplant and more. HelloFresh is a lifesaver for me as a working mom who really does believe in the power of cooking at home. And to be honest, my kids love a home-cooked meal, too. Lately, we have been craving a lot of Mexican food in this house. So just last week, we got the saucy chicken burrito bowls and the Mexican-style beef albodiga soup. Talk about hitting the spot. I am one of those 3 out of 4 parents that say that their kids eat more veggies with HelloFresh, and 91% of customers, me included, say they feel healthier eating with HelloFresh. HelloFresh has long been America's #1 choice for home cooking, and the best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/towardjustice10FM now to get 10 free meals and a free breakfast for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/towardjustice10FM. And that FM stands for free meals to get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. HelloFresh.com/towardjustice10FM. So Nelson's brought back to the United States, and then he's held in county under the conditions that you mentioned. I did want to go back quickly to the night that you described, where the night of the murders, law enforcement came to your house with guns drawn. How did they eliminate you as a suspect? Were you in Bartow at the time?
No.
Okay.
No, I had gone that late afternoon to Tampa because we were developing a software for our accounting system. So I was out there. And so once they,
Okay.
so even that night when I volunteered to go with them to the Plant City, I lived in Plant City, to the Plant City Police Department. Just at first they said it was a bomb that blew up on the news, that if something had blown up at the plant. Right. So we were concerned with all the employees. I mean, I was there for 7 years, concerned with who got hurt, what happened, what's going on. It wasn't until later that we found out that it was actually an assassination. It was a mafia style, small caliber, close proximity killing of 4 individuals there. We found out within days. It wasn't the same day. It might have been the next day or the next day after that, exactly who it was.
Okay.
That was it. But then I asked, am I under arrest? Because I have people calling me. They're like, what's going on? Don't say anything. And people are like, don't say anything to these guys. Bartow cops, FDLE, forget it. These guys are the worst. And so there's like, they said, ask them, are you under arrest? Are you on suspicion? Mm. And so they was like, no, you're not, and everything. So it's crazy.
Yeah. And Colin, also jump in anytime you want. You can follow some of the talking points, or you can or you can jump in with questions. But I wanted to now ask you, Francisco, you said earlier that, and it's the narrative of what the state alleges that how Nelson carried out these murders is wild. So I want you to explain that to us. But you also said that the prosecutors and the investigators, despite having evidence of other people having committed this crime, focused on Nelson for political reasons. Can you explain why? If they had evidence, why would they just not follow that evidence? I mean, at the end of the day, the political implication is having a cold case versus having it closed. What does it matter to them who they are able to convict?
So, all right. So let's start that way then. During all this time, I mean, we didn't find out about Bobby Venaria and the whole connection to the Staten Island Italian mob.
And who is Bobby? Please explain.
He was the head of the Italian mafia in Staten Island. He was the capo.
Mm.
He's the one who ordered the hit, not on George Gonzalez, but on Frank Dawson. And it was because Frank was trafficking cocaine for him.
Oh boy.
We had
The story
no
is going in a
idea that this
different
was
direction.
going on.
Yeah.
No, it was now. So he does this hit. I mean, he does this trafficking, and according to what we have, it's in testimony there, deposition and everything. He loses this shipment of cocaine. So Bobby Venaria turns around and says, "You owe me $1 million. You don't give me $1 million, I'm going to kill you." And this is happening at the same time that all of a sudden $1 million disappears out of the bank account. And instead of George and Phil coming to us and going, "This is what Frank did, and this is what we need to do. Let's take a distribution out of the company, right? So we can pay this off, and we'll get you take your distribution out of it, right? And then we'll do it that way. Or let us borrow the money from the whatever." They decide, no, we're 2 shareholders against 1. We don't have to tell you squat. We're just going to take it and not tell you anything. This is why we don't know about anything. It wasn't until 2012, 2013, when finally another set of attorneys, along with an author, an Ecuadorian author who was also, came to us and said, "Your story is incredible. I want to write a book." When he starts digging into it, he's like, "Who's this guy? Look at his testimony. And how is it that he knows exactly how this crime went down?" And everything he says.
And what is the witness you're referring to?
My mind's going blank. It'll come to me in a second. I'll give it.
Is it Fowler?
Fowler, Robert Fowler. Thank you.
Okay.
So Robert Fowler is one of these guys who's in the mafia, and he's arrested and he's up in some federal prison on the border of Indiana and Kentucky. And he decides to call the FBI and go, trying to get a deal for himself. "I know who killed the people in Bartow." And so they go over there, and there's his testimony, 3 of them. He outlines everything, and everything that he says is stuff that in 1998, like less than a year after the murders, the detail he's able to express isn't known by anybody unless they're the forensic investigators, unless they're the attorney or whoever's reading the case stuff. I never read any of this stuff because it was hidden.
Yeah.
This stuff was all hidden from the defense until a week or 10 days before the trial began. And there's all the documentation about that as well. But Roberts knows where the first gunshots are shot, who is there. He names them by name. A guy by the name of Vinny Aspirins, another guy called the Angel of Mercy. Their actual names are there, but this is stuff you just can't make up. The 2 Latinos that were also hired, to be there, which coincide with the eyewitness testimony of people that were working around there or driving by. All of that. He knew all of that. And none of that was public.
Okay. So the state has all this evidence, right? Like that's about as strong a lead as you can get, I feel like. Why do you think they did not follow that evidence versus going after Nelson?
The opinion is, and I share this opinion, is that, all right, who are you going to go after? You're going to go after extremely well-financed Italian crime boss who's left no evidence behind on who there is, and the only person that we can point the finger at, who can point the finger to Bobby and these other guys, is a multiple crime offender in a federal prison, right?
Right. So the only evidence they would have is Fowler in this case, is what you're trying to say. Okay.
Basically, or do we have to go after the Latino, right? Do we go after this Latino who talks with an accent and this crime happened in Bartow, Florida? Polk County at that time, and probably until today, has the KKK right out in the open. They meet every second Tuesday of the month at the same bar.
Wow.
They elect members to represent them in Tallahassee who openly say that they are KKK members. These are elected officials to government. So the racism is unbelievably strong down there. So what do? Do I go after this Latino, right? Or do I go after this Italian mob guy?
Mm. So you just think it was a harder, a more difficult lift? I'll say this, that, at the end of the day, though, they were able to get their conviction. And I think it's important. Like, let's set up for their listeners, what was the evidence that convicted Nelson? But I first want you to explain the state's theory of how Nelson committed this murders when he was, in fact, in Atlanta? What are they saying he did? How did he pull this off?
Mhm. Um, so let me just add this and then I'll give you this. So we're talking, right? We cooperated with the state, with the prosecutors and everything until until we had a lawyer up, right? Because we realized they don't care about who really did this. And we told them follow the money because $4.5 million disappeared from the bank accounts right prior to the murders. And we said, you got to follow the money. Wherever that money went, right? That's probably where you're going to find out what happened. They never did it. I was never to find out either, whatever happened to that money. Somebody told me who was working undercover for the FBI and the FDLE, infiltrated into my company, told me that money went to Italy. It's another story. All right. So the state's theory, which changed a little bit here and a little bit there, but basically they said, my father was in Atlanta and that he bought these tickets, two one-way tickets in cash, one to fly from Atlanta to Orlando, to land in Orlando at 3:30 in the afternoon under the name Juan Agasio. Now, Agasio was the maiden name of my father's first wife, who they had a son together named John Grieven. So they make a connection there. Now, I'll just say this really quick. The name Juan Agasio comes up on the passenger list, typewritten with a typewriter, and the very last list name on there, even though allegedly that ticket was bought 2 weeks ahead of the flight. Okay. So they say he lands in Orlando at 3:30 in the afternoon, drives 80 miles to get to Bartow, kills these people at around 5:30 in the afternoon, doesn't leave a stitch of evidence behind, right? But kills them all close range. So, sorry about being graphic, but when you kill somebody at close range, this blood splatter is huge when you're hitting them even with a small caliber weapon. So he's got to be coated, whether he's wearing whatever. He leaves there, be able to kill 4 people, right? With 3 different guns, first of all, a 22, a 32, and a 30, and a caliber 30 rifle. Get in a car and then drive to Tampa Airport, make its flight under the name John White, and then land at 9:37, which is what they said. And that was false. But they landing at 9:37 and giving them enough time to get to the hotel airport at 10:17. So there's 9 hours, right, between he was last seen on the hotel camera in the lobby till the next time he sees that. So he's able to accomplish and do all of this at that time. Now, keep in mind at 3:30 in Orlando, especially at that time, that was a parking lot. Every road was, bumper to bumper traffic. All right. And then to be able to land on it, my big thing was forget about everything else. That plane actually landed at 9:54 p.m. So even if he was on that plane, right, he would have to have gotten to the hotel lobby 5 miles away by 10:17. You land in Atlanta, you might not even make it to the gate.
Yeah.
Let alone get off the plane in row 30 and then get through that whole maze from the terminals to get out, get your car, taxi, and then make it to the airport over there in that time.
Yeah.
So it was an impossible scheme.
Also, I realize in the timeline is that he's seen on the hotel footage that afternoon at 12:21 p.m. And the flight they say that he takes from the Atlanta airport, this is a major airport. It's not a little small airport you can just run in.
Busiest airport in the country. Yeah.
Biggest.
That he gets on a flight that takes off at 1:36 p.m. Nobody who has traveled on on any airplane knows that first of all, you have to get to an airport, even if it's a domestic flight, at least an hour, if not 90 minutes earlier, just to check in and go through.
Atlanta
Yeah.
We didn't have
Yeah.
pre-check back then, so those lines were huge. You got to be
Yeah.
there minimum an hour and a half. You're cutting it close.
So they're saying in an hour, within an hour, he was, and the 1:36 is the time of takeoff, not the time of boarding. Boarding happens like 20, 30 minutes beforehand.
Mhm.
So within 20, 30, like within 30 minutes, he was boarding a plane at the Atlanta
Right.
airport. I mean, I just looked at that. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've been on a plane. I know that can't happen.
Yeah.
And yet, okay, so this whole setup sounds incredible. 3 guns. Where were the guns that the state says? Did he carry them with him? Did he have somebody holding them for him in Orlando? Like, where did the weapons come from?
So at the beginning, what they said is that he had gone in, that he was allowed to be in, right? That he had gone to his old office, got on the chair, and then reached up to the hung ceiling, moved the panel, and grabbed the guns out of there. Then when
So
they
he had
realized
guns stored in the ceiling of an office. Is that what you're
That's
saying?
that's what they're saying.
Okay.
And there's a little story behind that, but obviously it wasn't true. But nonetheless, they're saying, well, that's why he did it. And then they're saying, you see, there's a footprint on this chair, and it matches Nelson's footprint, which it didn't. So that's why they changed the theory later by saying, no, he brought the guns with him now. So where did he buy the guns? And this is where one of the evidences that they presented was a thing about a nephew of ours, far removed, but who's close with my father, had rented my father a car, and that my father somehow had obtained the guns somehow, these 3 guns to be able to do this and then get rid of them, obviously.
The older I get, the more refined my tastes get. Now, my budget hasn't quite caught up, but I'm at that point in my life where I'm not into fast food and I'm not into fast clothing anymore. I like pieces that are durable, well-made, quality, beautiful, and pieces obviously that I can afford in my budget. Those are the kinds of things I like to buy for myself. Classic, beautiful designs, and that's the kind of quality I want to gift to my loved ones. So whether you're shopping for yourself or looking for gifts to give to your loved ones this season, Quince pretty much has your whole list covered. They've got Mongolian cashmere sweaters for $50 when you'd normally pay $200 or more. These are the kind of sweaters you are going to wear on repeat, and they're going to be staples in your closet for decades to come. Then there's the denim that goes with everything. Believe me, I've got a whole corner of my closet dedicated to denim. Silk. Quince has silk tops and skirts for when you need to look put together. Cashmere beanies and scarves and down jackets that actually keep you warm. They also have beautiful Italian wool coats that are absolutely top of my list. They look designer, they feel luxurious, and they're made with premium materials. But like everything at Quince, the price won't make you panic. And that's because Quince works directly with trusted factories that maintain high standards for both craftsmanship and ethical practices, and they cut out the middleman and the markups. So Quince is able to pass those savings straight to you. So if you love beautiful, timeless, refined pieces, but don't want to pay the kinds of prices you have to at retail stores, check out Quince. Every time I step out in one of my numerous Quince cashmere sweaters, I always get asked where I got it from, and it's one of my favorite gifts to give at this point. I'm not going to lie, sometimes I buy something to gift from Quince and I end up keeping it myself. You too can find gifts so good that you will want to keep them with Quince. Go to quince.com/towardjustice for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/towardjustice to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/towardjustice.
You mentioned the footprint on the chair. My understanding is there was also this rubber glove from the crime scene that's quite important. So can you tell us about this rubber glove, its significance, and the testing that was done on it?
Yeah, so there were so many times here, Colin, that we thought finally, we're going to get him absolved of all this. But so there is it's a plastic glove, typical glove that you see food prep people use, right? That was found underneath Diane. this is the assistant district attorney that
One of the four victims. Yeah.
right. She was killed running away. There seems to have been some struggle between the two, and she was shot twice, one by each gun. But underneath her body, they found this plastic glove. And on that glove, they found DNA in the palm of the glove, but more importantly, in the fingertips of the glove. And when they tested the DNA of the fingerprints of the glove, they were able to get 11 out of 13 points. If I remember right, they're called points. And each point has two alleles.
Right.
This is the science behind it. Now, to have 11 of the 13 points, you basically know who that is.
That's a profile. That's
yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's not Nelson Serrano. In the palm, they find 5 of the same 11. Right? But they can't pin it. Now, one of the 5 that they find here has an allele that you can't have based on the alleles of 1 or 2 of the other points found in the tips of the glove.
Right.
But nobody argued that the glove was worn by a killer or one of the killers. And nobody argued that the DNA on the tips of the gloves excluded my father.
And why did nobody argue that? Because what happened?
Why didn't
No,
the defense?
they did. They turned around. They had the number one expert of DNA that's used by the FBI and all these agencies to audit DNA evidence. Turned around and said, "This is impossible." So what did the state do? The state said, "Well, that glove must have been worn by somebody else as well." So that they're saying that 2 separate people used the same glove in these murders that occurred so quickly with, with
no time, no cushion, no turnaround. Yeah,
right. And so, that's preposterous, at the very least, but, even through objections that shouldn't even be considered because it's preposterous, the judge still allowed it. Another basis for appeal, but nonetheless. And then we went to the Supreme Court, the same thing.
Wow. So we've seen this over and over again where DNA testing is done, the DNA of our defendant does not appear, and the state comes up with a different theory of why it doesn't appear, but says that doesn't mean this person is innocent. So this is just another version of that. But then, so the jury buys that, but they also buy, let's get back to the fingerprint. This fingerprint evidence is insane. Can you explain how it came about, what it was? And I feel like that might have been the most convincing thing for this jury, right?
Yeah, I still remember that the death penalty attorney that advises the governor of the state of Florida was sitting next to me when we were at the Florida Supreme Court. And one of the judges was telling the Florida prosecutor, he goes, "I just want to know, how do you have the nerve to use these fingerprints?" And he tried to answer some other thing. He tried to go and he goes, No. I don't want to hear about that. I just want to know, what basis do you get to use these fingerprints based on what we know about them? How do you use it? And then he starts talking about another thing. The judge raises his voice and he goes, "I don't want to say here," and you'll read this, you can see it on video. "I don't want to hear a single word come out of your mouth that doesn't answer my question directly." And the state attorney turned around and goes, "Judge, all I can tell you is those fingerprints belong to Nelson Serrano." The attorney sitting next to me pats me on the leg and he goes, "It's over. Your dad is out." So how does this still get presented? How does this jury still weigh that in and not dismiss this case or find him innocent? When they present it, right? So that's how do they find it? All this time goes by, right? They had gone to the Orlando, they talked to the Orlando parking management company. All this time during all the initial investigation.
Orlando Airport.
Right. Yeah. They went there at the beginning, is that, the whole thing. All these years go by. And allegedly, Tommy Ray testifies and says, "Yeah, well, I was talking with the family and they mentioned this name Agasio to me. So I thought, well, let me go check all the flights flying into Orlando from Atlanta and see if there's a negosio on there. And he goes, oh, look, there's one. There's a negosio over there. So then he decides, I'm going to go back to Orlando Airport. I'm going to go back to the management company and go, I want to see all your ticket stubs that you have from
Right.
3 years ago. Well, as it was testified he says they showed it to him. He went through it and oh my God, he finds him. Not just one ticket, but 2 tickets. And the other tickets from the day he supposedly went to Orlando Airport and bought the ticket in cash. And guess what? His fingerprints are on it. They got him.
Okay.
They get him indicted.
Here's what's confusing me about this. What they're saying is there's this airport parking lot, okay? And that these ticket stubs for the airport parking lot that I mean, like normally when I park at an airport, I mean, like that, the stuff stays with me, right? Like I pay it and then I get it back. It's kind of like my receipt. But in this situation, maybe this is back in 1997, the parking company has some part of the stub, maybe it's half a stub, whatever, and they keep it for 3 years. They're keeping these stubs, and then they find the stub, but it's not one, it's 2 different stubs, and they both have Nelson's fingerprints on them, right?
Right. So they're not keeping them. See, this is what comes up. Their policy is that after 90 days, they throw them away.
Right.
Now, not only that, but in those 3 years that went by, they had 2 floods that wiped out all their records. And I'm talking accounting records, payroll records, everything they had was all wiped out. But miraculously, and you can see it in the video, and I should say the pictures of Tommy Ray showing the 2 tickets, he's got a shoebox in front of him. And he testified that these were in a shoebox. So somehow these 2 tickets that are 2 weeks apart were somehow kept in a shoebox, and they survived the flooding that destroyed all their paper records and documents in their records rooms twice. And this all came out about the fingerprints. Now, the fingerprint expert, there's more, but go ahead.
Okay, no, because I still need to get to the meat of the story that I can't understand. They're saying that Nelson, 2 weeks before the murders, went and bought a parking ticket.
Parked there, got a ticket, right?
That he parked at what did he park there? This is what I'm not trying to understand, because the argument or the case is that he flies to Orlando, he gets a rental car, he drives to Erie Manufacturing, then he drives to Tampa. So assuming he's dropping off the rental in Tampa. At what point is he parking in Orlando?
So they're saying 2 weeks ahead of time, he had driven from Lakeland, where he lives, right?
Okay.
And drove to Orlando Airport and went in and bought a ticket, this one-way ticket, or 2 one-way tickets in cash.
Okay. 2 weeks before the murder, he does it.
That's what they allege, right? And then the day of the murders, he went there and got a parking stub ticket that because they're saying that Alvaro rented a car for him and then parked it in the parking garage and left the parking ticket with the car and the keys somehow. And that my father, when he got the car, then he had the ticket, was able to exit the parking garage and then hand the ticket to the attendant in order to pay for the parking.
Boy, okay. The story just stretches out crazier and crazier. Colin, what are you thinking about? Is this crazier than to Michigan too? I mean,
well, my question is, so your theory, the theory the state had was that Alvaro gets the ticket first, leaves it in the car. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And is Alvaro's fingerprint on the ticket stub?
No.
So it's right. They have no explanation for that.
There's on top. So the state of Florida, as one of their witnesses, brings out one of their top fingerprint experts for the state of Florida. While he's on the stand, he's able to testify that yes, he examined the pictures of the fingerprint of the parking ticket and then compared those to my father's and confirmed that those fingerprints matched. Then in cross-examination, they asked him point blank. He goes, "Do you think these fingerprints are fake or that they were planted?" And he turns out as a witness for the state and goes, "I don't have the science to be able to prove that these things were planted, but I think these are fake. I think these were planted." And he gives 4 reasons.
Okay.
He goes, number 1, he goes, when you grab a parking stub out of, when you roll down your window, right? Yeah. You reach out your left hand. Uh-huh. You grab the ticket stub, right? With your thumb and your thing.
Absolutely.
And you have to yank it out. right? Now, maybe then you put it in your right hand to put it in your pocket, but you at least have those wedges, there. Then when you go to pay, you have to hand it over to the parking attendant, the cashier. Now, judging from what they know about that system, the cashier has to grab that ticket and then swipe it, right? Before they hand it back or keep it in their own records and they give a receipt out.
Right.
There is, in both of them, there are no other fingerprints
Just his.
of anybody or smudges or anything.
Right.
And what about
Because
the rental car? Is there evidence that the nephew rented a car?
There is that he rented it. There's evidence that he rented.
Okay.
The second reason comes about, he says, this whole thing about the parking management company, that 2 floods, 90 days, somehow they both miraculously appear here. He goes, I don't believe any of that.
Okay.
He goes, the third one is that the fingerprint that's on both tickets comes from Nelson's right index finger,
Right.
right? And it's exactly half. So if you take the one half on the one ticket and the other half on the other ticket and put them together, it makes one fingerprint. And there's a straight line that's like as if they were cut through.
Mm-hmm.
It's a straight line right there. And he goes, and this isn't on the edge of the ticket. It's in the middle of the ticket. And he goes, the fourth reason is no matter what you do, he picked up his glass. No matter what you try to do, you can't leave a fingerprint with a straight line like that. He goes, that's why I think these things are fake.
Wow. So the state's own fingerprint expert is giving 4 reasons why this is likely fabricated. And for me, the most compelling is, as you mentioned, you're likelier to leave the fingerprint when you're grabbing something and pulling it, which would be consistent with Serrano, or not with Alvaro pulling it out of the machine, and yet there's nothing from him on the ticket.
With his left thumb, generally.
On either ticket. And the tickets, and the fingerprints weren't on the tickets anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The fingerprints were just photographed because the chemicals that they use to bring the fingerprint out destroyed the fingerprint.
Got it.
So
Gift giving season is upon us, and I know every single year our imaginations are stretched to the limit as we try to think of unique gifts to give to the people we love. And almost always there's like that one person in your life who's such a great, thoughtful gift giver, and you're like, what do I give back to this person? Well, I've got the perfect gift for you, and that is the Aura frame. Aura frames are the hidden gem that becomes the favorite gift long after the wrapping paper is gone. Aura frames have been featured in almost 500 gift guides during 2024 alone. 3 times Oprah selected the Aura gift frame as one of her favorite things. It's one of my favorite things. It was the most cherished gift that I ever gave to my father. He carried that thing around everywhere he went, when he was in the hospital, when he was in rehab, and when he came home during his final days. That Aura frame was his lifeline to his grandchildren, to all the people he loved. The Aura frame is so easy to set up. It just takes 2 minutes to set up a frame using the Aura app. You will have complete control over who has access to the frame, and the Aura app lets you share pictures more securely than email. You can even upload videos up to 30 seconds long, and your favorite live iPhone pictures will play right on the frame. Believe it or not, there's an embedded speaker in the frame that can play audio on demand. Aura frames have meticulously calibrated high-resolution displays and really fun interactions. You can actually react with cute emojis to show that you love a picture and send congratulations. And Aura frames are easy to use, especially like for my dad, who was elderly. It was harder for him to figure out tech stuff, but Aura frames have an interactive touch bar. You can change picture, view details, like pictures, and so many more things with just a simple tap or swipe on the edge of the frame and keep your display smudge-free. With the Aura frame, you can upload unlimited free photos and pictures. You can even preload pictures before the Aura frame even ships, and you can personalize your gift by adding a message before it arrives. It even comes with a beautiful gift box. So believe me, you're going to be your favorite person's favorite gift giver this year with the Aura frame. And for a limited time, you can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames. They were named #1 1 by Wirecutter. All you have to do is use promo code JUSTICE at checkout. That's AURAFrames.com, promo code JUSTICE. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays and support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. So all you have now is a photograph of an alleged half a fingerprint on each ticket stub that the state took. Can you, like, what do you mean? Like, it was like dusted and like you can see, I mean, like, you see like in TVs and film, you see like an outline in the dust, fingerprint dust. Like, is that what you're talking about? The photo I saw?
They said they used certain chemicals to be able to lift the fingerprint off. And whatever that was ends up destroying the fingerprint that's actually on the surface of the ticket.
How do you
it's gone.
How do you think, how is a fingerprint like that planted, though, I guess is my question. Or do we even know if it ever existed on those stubs? I mean, what's the evidence it was ever on the stubs?
My father was fingerprinted twice. Remember when I mentioned that he had gotten arrested to be in front of the cameras of America's Most Wanted? They fingerprinted him twice that day. And so my father was like, why are you fingerprinting me again? You just fingerprinted me. And they goes, what are you talking about? And they fingerprinted him twice, on top of the fact that when they had their search warrant, back in December of 97, they went through my father's stuff and everything, and they took a ton of stuff out of there. So they could have gotten my father's fingerprint from so many different sources. But to think that they're so stupid to get the right index finger, like they don't know, and they did all this thing, we were like, thank God, we're done.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing. The biggest thing was that. And then the rental car was the only other big thing that they had. And that blew up in their face in the same manner.
Yeah, let's go through that then. So in what way did the rental car at first seem like this is strong evidence, but then, as you say, blew up in their faces?
So when they looked for records and they found out that Alvaro had rented a car from Orlando Airport, or somewhere in Orlando, they went to him and they said, why did you rent a car on December 3rd? And his first explanation to the cops was that he had rented it for a friend of his out of Miami. They went to Miami and the guy says, I don't know what you're talking about. So they had to go back to him. So then they took him to the grand jury, and then he had testified in the grand jury, and he said something else, but it was also a lie. So then they take him to the grand jury again, right now under threat of perjury. And this is when he testifies that he rented the car for my father, and that he was supposed to just leave it, and let him know where it was. My father could grab it. And that later he had to go to Tampa to go recover the car and then take it back to Orlando, which again didn't make any sense because you can return a car anywhere. Right. But nonetheless, this was his testimony. And so he deliberates this to the jury, that my father called him and told him, you need to rent me a car, that allegedly this might have been for a mistress that needed a car in Orlando. That was another part of the whole story, and all of this. So when he was cross-examined, they asked him, the first time you said this, the second time in front of a grand jury, you said this. Then here you are saying this, why did you lie the first time? And then he was like, cause this and that. And he goes, well, why can't we believe that you're not lying now? Why are you saying this now? Didn't Nelson Serrano help you? Didn't he help you with so many different things? Didn't he help your family with so many things? So why are you doing this now? And in front of the jury, he said, I'm telling you this right now because if I don't tell you this, they told me that they were going to pin this murder on me.
Wow.
So the only reason I'm saying what I'm saying is because I don't want to go to jail for murder. He said that. And it's in the transcripts. It's in the videos. He said that to the jury. So you think, done. It's over. So, and this is where the third calamity ends up happening in this whole thing, where our defense attorneys, where we paid everything we ever had to have them, turned around and said, we don't have to present a defense.
Oh God, this is like giving me Gutierrez vibes. Yes, this happened in Mon's case.
And he said, and we're like, well, why? I mean, You could spend so
The
much
case
time.
is too weak,
You
right?
can,
Because that.
yeah, you can say all this kind of stuff. I mean, you can talk about the trip. Nothing's been expressed about this stupid cockamamie trip. That's impossible. If we can just poke those holes, then the whole trip is gone. So let's go do that. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's keep cementing. We just went through 3.5 weeks, 3.5 weeks, where jurors are falling asleep, right? Of just constant barragement of crap. And their two biggest things are gone. We should spend at least a week. Let's bring back some more people. Let's talk about this. And they said no, because right now in the state of Florida, if you don't present a defense, then you're able to be the last voice the jury hears. In other words, the defense starts first, then the state, and then you could be the last voice to say it. That's much more powerful here, that we can then hear what the state has to say and then hit them in the face with what we have to say. And then we'll stress all the reasonable doubt that the fingerprints aren't any good, that the whole rental car thing was fabricated, all this stuff and everything. And then that's it. There's nothing but reasonable doubt in this whole thing. Little did we know that the jury had already been tampered with. Little did we know that there's racism all in this file. That this wasn't about, the right thing, innocent till proven guilty. Two or three of the juries after this, to a reporter said, I kept waiting for them to show me the evidence that he was innocent.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So if we would have just spent a week, a few days,
Can I ask
we
you
wouldn't have.
so the allegation, I mean, it feels like it's so simple to disprove that he was obviously never took these flights. Did your defense counsel ever kind of try to run down the alleged aliases that your dad used and to see were there people by this name actually on these flights, and be like, by the way, this was the person on the flight and not Nelson?
Yeah.
Or do you think that it was because you said it was typewritten, right? Like the first name, the Juan name was typewritten, and you think that could have been added later. But what about the other name that was used on the way back?
Yeah. So what you learn out of all this, Colin, don't take this the wrong way. What you hire an attorney for is for their guidance and their experience. You don't let them make the decisions. This is what we learned. Okay. You make your decisions based on what they advise you to do. Period.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to do that. In fact, Cheney Mason threatened to leave the case if I asked any more questions.
Wow.
They never bothered to work on a defense. Cheney Mason, who was literally 20 minutes from the airport, never went to the airport himself or sent anybody there. We had detectives, all paid by the state, by the way. All our expenses were paid by the state. Never sent anybody to Atlanta to go look at because allegedly, according to the FDLE, there were no tapes. I bet you there were. I bet you there were tapes of security. I bet you there were tapes
these are airports.
of the gate.
Granted, it's before 9/11, but still, there are cameras all over airports.
Every gate has a camera.
Of course, yeah.
And these things are kept. They're not destroyed after 90 days because crime can happen at any point in time. They keep them. They never went to Orlando. They never went to go check for tapes and videos and stuff like that over there. They never prepared a defense. So this is why my father, and I'm convinced of this as well now, that they were on the take. Somehow or another, there was a take here. And this whole thing about keeping the mafia out of all of this until the very last second, it wasn't a week before the trial that this evidence was provided to Mason and Norgard, in other words, my father's defense attorneys. Is something else was going on here to protect Jerry Hill, to protect the real story from getting out, and all of that. Won't be the first time that Jerry Hill and John Aguero and Paul Wallace had sent innocent people to death row. It was a big thing for them.
So now the murder weapons have never been found. They've never found, let's say, if he was, he killed people, whoever killed these people up close and personal, like there would have been obviously some blood spatter evidence. Like no bloody clothing was found. There's not a trace of DNA, not Nelson Serrano's, not the victims in the rental car, which also you think he would have left traces of evidence if he was in the car.
Or the sand. Let's remember this about forensic evidence, which I found very interesting. the sand outside your door, the dirt outside your door, right? Let's say it's Bartow, is much different than the sand outside Orlando.
Right.
Yeah.
So you think about it, you're walking out of a crime scene where there's blood everywhere. There's, and you're picking up you're picking up sand because it's all sand out there,
Mm.
right? Even though the pavement is, the parking lot is paved, there's still sand on you. You're picking that up and you're leaving it, in the carpet of the car rental. None of that forensic evidence came forward to say, oh, look, I found some Bartow sand in here, which they can
Right.
do.
And then there's eyewitnesses. There's a couple of eyewitnesses, and can you tell us about them? These are people who might have seen something when the murders actually took place, but also were they presented at trial or not?
So we had one key guy. He worked across the street and he had left the office. And when he left the office, he found it strange that there was a young, that Asian looking, well-dressed blazer, sweater vest on, standing by the road, trying to light a cigarette when it was windy. He could have just walked 4 steps to get by the building, and lit in there. And then on top of the fact that he was well dressed in Bartow, you don't see people very well dressed unless you're at the courthouse, right? Or at the bank. You don't, everybody else is very casual, right? It's farm country out there. It's all phosphate mines. It's a very blue collar town. So it all caught him by, like weirdness to him to see somebody like that. And when he's driving by, he's looking over and he's thinking, this is kind of strange. And it was later that he, through his insistence really, that he was able to talk to Bartow police officer to say, man, I saw something yesterday, 2 days ago. This is what I saw.
And this
And
is
so
around the same time as the murders took place.
exactly, yeah. When he was leaving and estimated about when the murders took place, that this was out there.
And by the way, how do we know exactly what time the murders took? Is it because like employees had left or the discovery of the bodies? Like how were they able to determine that window?
So employees leave at 5 o'clock every day. The office employees do, and they had a protocol of locking the door behind them every day. And who was left behind was George and Frank and Frank.
Hmm.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, Frank and George Batiso.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they're discovered by the third business partner, the father, right? And so is that why? Is it the discovery of the bodies that was able to for them to narrow the window of when the murder must have taken place around 5:30?
Well, they ended up showing up around 7 or so.
Oh.
Because as horrific as this story is, it gets worse. They were celebrating that night the birthday of their twin 12-year-old daughters.
Oh. But if they showed up at 7, the murders could have taken place anytime between 5 and 7, not necessarily 5:30, right?
Yeah, I don't know
You
about
don't know exactly. Okay. Okay.
how they were pinning things down.
Well, I mean, they had to use the flight manifest to be like, this is the only timeline that works.
Squeeze it in there,
yeah. He couldn't have done it at 6:45 and then made it back to, and turned around and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and then at the timeline of when he saw the guy standing outside, there was also another teacher who was driving by the county road, which is half a block away. He was driving down. He also saw, somebody who's like Latino, dark hair, also dressed up a little bit, walking down the county road. He testified that. So that it's kind of like around that 5:30 time that they all felt this was going on.
And did the defense present these witnesses to suggest alternate suspects or no?
So the guy that was across the street, that was presented. That was brought forward, and the defense didn't present. Remember, the defense didn't present a defense, but he was brought forward because he had given the sketch artist the details of what this guy looked like. And when you take a look at that sketch, it doesn't look anything like my father, right? But then they redid the sketch later, and they redid it so it looked like my father.
They did it a second time.
They did it a second time. So when he was brought forward, there was that whole thing about manipulation of the evidence, and and what the state was doing, and they were able to show the one and the other. So there was an examination and a cross-examination that was done there that to bring out where this guy turned around and goes, the first one was the one I know about, not the second one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this is basically the world of evidence that was presented by the state, right? Basically the parking ticket, the testimony of the nephew who rented the car, and then the allegations that this was a kind of over a business dispute and money missing, right? Like that's
and revenge, that there was anger and all that kind of stuff. But they kept saying that George was the kind of guy that came early and stayed late, So this is why Nelson would have taken a trip on the chance
he knew he would be there. Oh, okay.
that he would be there, right? But it was completely the opposite. The reason that George and Phil fought so much was because Phil would get there before 7 a.m. to open up everything. And then Phil would supposed to leave at 3:30. He'd end up leaving 4:30. George was supposed to get there at 9 and stay until 5. George would show up 9:30, 10 o'clock. He would leave right after Phil would leave.
Mm.
So this
Good
whole
fit.
thing.
Right. Doesn't make sense.
Never. George was always trying to skim everything he could because it made him feel good. He tried to cheat. He'd submit his personal visa expenses into the company. He was trying to cut off time here and there. He would argue not to give people raises. I mean, even though he had all the money in the world, more money than he could have spent, this is who George was. This is why he was so disliked.
Well, Nelson was convicted based on this evidence, and he was also sentenced to death on this. But in 2017, he was resentenced, and he was resentenced to life. Is that right or no?
No. So
Explain what happened then.
Sure. So when the U.S. Supreme Court rendered their opinion against the state of Florida, and they basically said, you were behaving unconstitutionally, you have to amend this, you have to resolve it. There was fighting going on, but they came up with what's called the Hearst decision, of which they said, okay, anybody who had a split decision on this, we're going to have to resentence them. So you can imagine the scope of so there were 454 death row inmates at the time of the Hearst decision. Over 300 had to be resentenced. So you can imagine the burden and the cost that represented, as well as the opportunity to have all these kind of evidences, whether they were physical or exculpatory, right? All of this was going to end up being rehashed again on all of these cases. And there's a lot of corruption in these things. So nobody wanted it and they fought it and everything. Now, they developed a protocol, a rule of thumb. And what they were doing was they were saying, okay, the oldest of the prisoners need to be resentenced first because of their age. And then there were other prompters as well, like their execution was coming up, things like that. So my father should have been resentenced in 2017 when the Hearst decision took effect. But they postponed it to 2019. And then they continually postponed it and postponed it and postponed it and postponed it.
And
even though
COVID
he was the
happened too.
oldest. COVID happened as well, but still.
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything. In court, they would turn around and go, we need to postpone this another 6 months, right? No reason. They just needed it. They would say, the schedule is too full. We don't have space in the court to do this. They're trying to do this. And so we're like, well, let's pick another courthouse. No, we're not going to have a change of venue. All this. And so we're just going to do it. And the judge would agree. And this is how it went on, for 7 years. And what they were doing, they were keeping us, they were resentencing other people, but they were keeping us from going to federal court because they knew once we got to federal court,
right? Evidence.
Exactly what, yeah. I mean, state of Florida, they've overturned death penalty cases from the federal level more than any other state in the country.
Right.
And especially Polk County, especially John Aguero and Jerry Hill.
And you were just procedurally prohibited from going to federal court until this was resolved. Is that why you couldn't go to federal court before the resentencing?
There's no capacity for a defense attorney, other than rendering their objections and complaints, that a judge can be motivated to change things, unless they personally, at their discretion, decide, I've had enough of these delays. We're putting this in. But just because of the political baggage that this thing carried, they weren't going to allow it. You know.
And also, I believe that the prosecutor who was in charge of the resentencing, there was a bit of a conflict of interest there too.
So John Aguero and Paul Wallace were the two prosecutors of this. Now, John Aguero had already died from a heart attack while he was visiting Morocco, but Paul Wallace was then assigned this. And Paul Wallace was the one who went down to Ecuador and did this kidnapping. Now, Paul Wallace was the first constitutional representative of the state to obstruct a federal process since 1838, when a prosecutor in Vermont had done that with somebody they took out of Canada. Mm. So when he went down there and did what he did the kidnapping and all of that, that was a constitutional officer of the state of Florida doing that. This wasn't a cop. This wasn't this wasn't the CIA or the FBI or the FDLE. This was a constitutional officer. So the United States was now subject to my claim, which we won against the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights because of the lack of due process of what occurred because of what Paul Wallace did. And for them to put Paul Wallace on this, we have all his emails, him communicating to the Justice Departments, to the U.S. Justice Department, to the Department of State, as well as the Florida's Attorney General, right? All of that. They didn't want any of this because this was all we're going to end up coming up. Mm. And so he should never have been assigned this case, and yet he was. And even though we objected to it, what they said was that we have nobody else. We got nobody else. How do you have nobody else?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Nelson waited 7 years to be resentenced, and he waited all those years on death row, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so his conditions didn't change. And last year, in August of 2024, though, Nelson stopped waiting because Nelson passed away in prison. We waited. I waited until now to let our listeners know that because I wanted you to understand, and be really compelled by the circumstance in this case and understand how long this man waited for justice, how long he waited, and how hard, Francisco, you have fought all these years, because there's nothing you haven't done. I'm talking about going to the media, having a book written. There's been a documentary made, I believe, by was it an Ecuadorian filmmaker, but it's a Spanish language documentary. Mm-hmm. And then as he's waiting and waiting and waiting for resentencing, I remember he got quite ill. Was it the last year of his incarceration?
Yeah, it did. And these were mites. These were like bed bugs kind of thing. And what they do is they crawl into your skin, they lay eggs, and they eat. And what they're doing is they're just eating your skin that you can't really feel until they bite a nerve. And then it's like literally like a pin going into your skin. And these get all over, like especially your groin area, everywhere around. And this is something extremely easy to treat with creams and pills. But my father was being denied this treatment. It wasn't until other cellmates started developing this thing that they finally admitted that this was what it was, and that they started doing something about it. But we're talking months. You can't sleep. It's just think about it all around your body. Yeah. You're feeling these pins coming at you all over, and it's like a safety pin, just tink, 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 all over. And no matter what we did, no matter all the complaints, everything that we threw at them with attorneys and me, letters, getting the media involved, they wanted to continue to torture him, which they did his entire time he was incarcerated. But this was just another form. And then they used that excuse to kill him, to put him into another part of the jail where they could kill him.
What do you mean by that? Tell us what happened. If you're open to it, if you're up to it.
I am just trying to collect myself. So when he got this the second time, he was completely at his wit's end. He was not going to go through that again, which he did for months and months. It was so horrific. So with all my calls and and everything that I was doing, they decided, all right, we're going to take you out of the cell and we're going to put you in another wing, so that we can fumigate and this and that, whatever your cell. So they sent him, and instead of putting him in another wing with other death row inmates that was populated, they put him in a wing that was not populated. Not only was it not populated, it had no Wi-Fi, it had no phone access. We ended up going 2 weeks without communicating with him. Next thing you know, another week goes by. We don't know what's going on. We're calling in, going, can you please get a message to my father? Can you tell me what's going on? Is he okay? Can we get him on the phone? And I'm just getting the vanilla from them, nothing. Whether they're not answering or they're just saying, because I get around certain phone calls, nothing's going on. Then all of a sudden we get a phone call from one of the inmates. Now, I don't know, this is a coincidence. There's no way medically that we can prove anything, but he did develop a tumor in his front lobe. And that kind of tumor, what happens when it gets big enough is that it shuts you off. You're a zombie. You're awake, or you're at least look awake, but you can't move. You can't talk. Only your vitals are working. When this is an assumption of mine, but I know that at some point they went to see him, and then instead of keeping him, just leaving him there, he's in a wheelchair. They took him in and put him in his cell in this state. So when the other cellmates
He's
got
basically
out,
catatonic.
exactly,
Yeah.
and he's in this wheelchair and he stinks. He's in the cell. When the cellmates are allowed to get out into their wing, they're coming over to him and he's just sitting there. This is what they're telling me. He's just sitting there, just looking straight out. There's no reaction. They're yelling at him. He won't say anything, won't do anything. And he's soiling himself.
Oh.
Right? So there's a smell going on. It's not good for anybody. But then, and they're complaining to the guards. They're complaining to the medical staff. They're complaining to anybody they can. We got to do something. And nobody would do anything. 2 weeks.
In that
2
state.
weeks he's like that state.
Holy moly.
Sitting down, not moving, in his own excrement.
Not eating.
Not
drinking.
Not drinking. Nothing. Till finally, one of the good-hearted guards says, I'm done with this too. I'm done with the smell. They open him up. The inmates are the ones that go in there and pick him up to take him to the shower to clean him up. And that's when they see the back of his butt and the back of his legs, just pus, just exploded open. His skin is just pus and everything like that. So they're trying to clean them. Other inmates are in the cell. They're trying to clean around there and everything and get everything because, the smell was just so horrific and everything. And they're able to take him back. And while they're in there, they find my phone number.
Oh.
And one of the inmates calls me and he tells me all this. And I had ongoing conversations with him as well as others about all of this. And they're all willing to testify about this if they're kept alive. In any case, I'm on the phone. Of course, I call the attorney. I call the jail, and we're just bombarding them until we finally get an answer. The next day is when they take him to Jacksonville Memorial Hospital.
It took that long.
Wow. Yeah. And then when they get him there, he's in a wing of the hospital that's under guard. You have to go through a metal detector. I mean, it's like a prison in itself, but it's just like a typical hospital wing. And we want to go see him, of which that's another story about they were not going to let us see him.
I remember when you were telling me this last year. Yeah.
And he didn't survive. He survived another 10 days or so.
Were you able to see him at all before he passed?
They weren't going to let us see him. And we went to the governor. We went to Attorney General. We had the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights get involved. The High Council of the United Nations got involved.
Wow.
And the warden said, okay, I'll give you half an hour.
Oh my God.
So we turned around and said, what are you talking about, half an hour? My sisters have to come from Indianapolis, Charlotte. We have to make this thing happen. I mean, we need to see what's going on. We need to be. They're telling me the doctors. I am in conversation now with this contractor who's the doctors and all that kind of stuff, and they're by law need to talk to me. And they're telling me this is terminal. They're telling me that he's inoperable. And they're not sure if he's in pain or not. It doesn't seem to be, stuff like that.
And he has not been conscious in weeks, not like really full, like responsive, right? At this point, yeah.
Right. And they finally got him to be responsive.
Okay.
They did. He was able to wake up. After he was dehydrated. Think about it.
Yeah.
2 weeks without water, food. All this kind of stuff. Surprised he wasn't dead already. And then he was riddled with infection. His whole body was riddled with infection. 85-year-old man. And so we pushed, and it finally came down that it's like, all you get is half an hour.
Oh my God.
So we got to see him. My sisters came down. We drove over. We're ready. I made sure we knew all the rules. We didn't want any kind of delay. And we got in to see him. And he was awake. And he was responsive.
Oh, good.
We were able to talk. He was able to tell me, the BS, how he was kept and everything. And then he was able to understand that he got a tumor. I was able to see it, because I don't believe anybody, right?
Mm.
Luckily, one of the doctors was able to tell us more than anybody else would tell us. And so I believe him that he did have a tumor and that the results of that tumor made him catatonic.
Mm.
And that the reason they can't operate on him is because he's riddled with infection.
God.
That if they would have brought him in immediately, they would have been able to operate on him. Despite him being 85, he was still a very healthy, strong individual. My father was a fighter, and he wanted to see his name cleared. He was, and his side of the family lives to be 100. My uncle just died last week, 100 years old. His brother, the last of them. His sister lived to 103. So he would have lasted.
Yeah.
And they would have been able to operate him, and they would have saved him. That's why I say they committed murder. Intentional murder. But we were able to talk to him. We were able to laugh together. We were able to, with my sisters. He was strong, but it was half an hour.
It's unconscionable.
Yeah.
And
it is so cruel. It is so cruel. It's breathtaking how cruel it is.
Give us a few hours.
Yeah. So
we
after
we did get another visit.
Okay.
We were able to get another visit, and this time it was for 3 hours.
Okay.
But by then they had done something. They had to put a trachea into him. And so then he couldn't talk. Even doing my best to read his lips, we barely were able to get something through. But he was also in and out, with all of this as well. And it was just getting worse. And he didn't last more than a week or so after that.
Francisco, I know how hard you have worked. to get justice for your father all these decades. And I, this is one of the most heartbreaking stories I've ever, or cases that's ever come across. I think undisclosed. And I feel so bad that we weren't able to do something. And I know every time we talked, I was just super frustrated that it felt like the lawyers were just your lawyers also were just waiting and waiting and waiting. And it was just like, what can be done? I I want the reason Francisco knows this. Francisco knows that I have been trying to help develop and pitch a series or a documentary or something and getting more media attention around this. And it's been hard because producers and networks are like, but he's passed away, right? And I don't see any reason why that's any less of a reason to tell his story and get justice for Nelson still.
He was murdered. He didn't
was
pass
murdered.
away.
Yeah.
He was murdered by the state in order to protect themselves. I mean, how far will a government go? I mean, we know how far a government will go in order to protect themselves. But this isn't the government. And I keep saying that, and I want to retract all of that. This isn't the government, right? This is Jerry Hill.
Yeah.
This is John Aguero. This is, whatever image, the attorney general wants to keep and all this kind of stuff. Egos. That's what it is. I mean, the systems that we have, for as faulty as they are, there's plenty of people that, salute to the flag for the honor of being an American, for what it really means, or at least what it's supposed to mean to be an American. And it's just these individuals are the ones that corrupt it and go against everything there is of what we determine to be American justice and ideals in order to benefit themselves so that they don't have to explain to their grandchildren what real evil jerks they really are. That's it. That's all they're protecting. And they go so far as to kill other people, to ruin the lives of not just the person they put in death row, but the entire community behind them is what they're doing.
What recourse do you have now? Do you have any legal recourse?
So not the only legal, so I can't go to the federal court anymore. He's dead. So I don't have any way to go through that channel anymore. The only thing I can do now is civilly, I can sue the state of Florida for murder, for wrongful death, actually.
Yeah.
And if I can convince anybody, to place federal, criminal charges against the state of Florida or the jail or, any of these things, right? The medical contractor that's there, the jail itself, Department of Corrections, right? All the way up to Governor DeSantis himself, right? Is the head of this government. I can do that, but think about the money. I mean, it's millions upon millions and millions of dollars just to get started. And then you're up against $1 trillion economy when it comes to the state of Florida. So there's no pro bono on this thing. I mean, unless somebody came in and goes, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go all the way in because we're going to win. We've got the evidence. And what's the evidence, right? Medical reports, so who knows if they're still around, doctors and are they going to say anything against their own livelihood and under their own threat of everything they've tried to build for themselves? And we've got death row inmates who've seen it all, witnessed it firsthand.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's
What I'm
the
hearing from
only.
you, Francisco, is that maybe somewhere in our audience, the hundreds of thousands of people who listen to this, there might be a lawyer who's willing to take this on for you.
I'm willing to take it on.
Yeah.
I'm there. I'm not only for me and my dad,
Of course.
but for everybody else that's wrongfully convicted. I'm using what I know to help them and what I can.
Where can our listeners read about the case, watch the documentary, get more information, and what can they do to support you at this point?
Yeah. That's a big question, right? A lot of people hear this and they're like, well, what can I do? Right. And believe me, every little pebble will hit another pebble and it'll just keep rolling. Next thing you know, you got an avalanche. This is how it gets started. So one person can make a difference. If you get more people to join, and you don't have to be a recruiter, you just have to be present. So if you go to our website, which is www.Nelson Serrano, that's NelsonSerrano.org, NelsonSerrano.org. You'll find a lot of the history information over there. You'll find contact information. You get a hold of us. You're going to find links to documentaries. You'll find links to other podcasts. And then if you go to our Facebook page, you can go to our Instagram feed, and you'll be able to get these contacts as well. There's podcasts out there as well that others have done for wrongful convictions. If you know
Jason
about
Flom, I know, has done
Jason
one.
Flom, yeah, that one there was great. That's with one of the defense attorneys, so you can hear more of a legal aspect about what he was, up against, trying to get things through. Of course, all that was prior to the murder of my father, but nonetheless, it gets more. And then we do have a new book coming out by the beginning of next year. This is more about, they want to make it more about my struggle on all this kind of stuff, but all of this is going to end up coming up, as well as there is another documentary, a series that's being done that this particular production company wants to put out and get on. They've worked again with the major platforms, and they feel pretty confident that they can try to get something out. But again, we're knocking on wood and praying every day.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, you let us know when the new book comes out, when the documentary is hopefully produced and out, and we would love to share it on our socials and with our listeners. I'm sure our listeners would love to read that and watch the show too if it gets produced. Thank you. I know this is hard. I mean, I can imagine how hard this is to talk about this at this point, and I appreciate so much that you are willing to come out and still continue to tell this story, which I think is so important. Colin, if you have any closing thoughts or questions, I'll turn it over to you. Otherwise, I think we'll.
No, I think I'm good. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah. And one last thing.
Time.
Francisco, you said that folks can reach out, contact you through the website, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So
100%.
if anybody wants to contact Francisco, please feel free to do it through that. If anybody would like to help support, like raise the money for this lawsuit, or is a practicing attorney in Florida licensed attorney in Florida who would like to take this on, definitely get in touch with Francisco.
It is. It's big publicity case here. It's international. There's so much that goes on in here. So for the people that are listening, that are thinking, well, maybe our firm would want to take this thing on.
Right.
You would get international support on this thing. It's really quite huge. The country of Ecuador is there to support this as well. They have supported every legal action we've done. They're under no obligation at this point in time to help with this lawsuit, although we're working on that as well. But nonetheless, this would be huge, and there would be a huge amount of publicity on this. As well, I think it would make a landmark case that would change the way this thing is looked at constitutionally, because so many things have been corrupted and let go. For other people that are looking at this individually, if this really irks you, look in your state. There's innocence projects all over. There's a bunch of other organizations that do this, and just start listening to them, follow them. You'll start seeing more and more to do, and then your contributions to what their efforts are can also make a lasting impact to the lives of so many.
Thank you, Francisco. We are always here to support you. And you can reach out to me. You got my number anytime you need anything.
Thank you so much for this. I appreciate it. Colin, what a pleasure to meet you, and here available for you guys as well for anything else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Undisclosed listeners, it's Mithil, executive producer of Undisclosed Toward Justice. As you know, we did something new a few months ago by utilizing SpeakPipe as a way for you guys to leave us voice notes. For anyone new here, you can go to speakpipe.com/undisclosed to leave us your questions or thoughts and comments. Since the response to SpeakPipe has been so amazing, we've got 2 additional exciting announcements to make. First, we have a new Facebook community group where you can engage with us and one another about all things true crime and criminal justice. Just go to facebook.com/groups/towardjustice and answer 3 simple questions and you're in. In addition to that, we also just relaunched our Patreon page at patreon.com/undisclosedpod. So many folks have already signed up, and we can't express our gratitude enough to each and every single one of you. Even $1 goes a long way and allows us to do the work pro bono for our defendants. Also, I would like to give a quick shout out to Hannah McCarthy for audio production, as well as Patrick Cortez and Ramiro Marquez for our theme music. To engage with us on social media, we're on Instagram and Facebook at Undisclosed Podcast. You can find us on TikTok, YouTube, and X at Undisclosed Pod. Whether you're new or a returning listener, You can check out our previous cases and bonus episodes by going to our revamped website at undisclosedpod.com. If you would like to follow Colin and Rabia on social media, you can follow Rabia at Rabia2, the number 2, on Instagram, and Colin at EvidenceProf on Instagram, X, and Blue Sky. Thank you for your continued support for us and for supporting our sponsors. Until next time.